For a general strike and civil disobedience today in support of their demand for the ruling military council to hand over immediately to a civilian authority. However, some parties have denounced the strike, and the military council has accused what it called plotters of trying to undermine the Egyptian state. From Cairo, here's Yolanda Gnell.
In Tahrir Square, in the centre of Cairo, there are significant crowds now gathering there. Now, of course, the calls not for Mubarak's departure, but for the departure of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, the ruling military council. But that said, there is a much bigger split than we saw 1 year ago. And all through the morning on state television, officials have been interviewed from different state sectors talking about how workers have turned out today, and warning that economic consequences really would be dire at this stage if people stayed away from work in any number.
Anti-government activists say at least 4 people have been killed in the Syrian city of Homs in renewed attacks by government forces during a fresh bombardment of opposition districts. Government forces have been conducting a powerful artillery assault on Homs this week. The Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says that his country will announce important and major nuclear achievements in the next few days. Mr. Ahmadinejad's speech was marking the 33rd anniversary of the Iranian Islamic Revolution. James Reynolds reports.
The anniversary of the country's Islamic Revolution has given the President, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the chance to give a friendly crowd a bit of a rousing. He told a rally in Tehran's Azadi Square that all the needs of the Iranian nation would be met by Iranian scientists in the near future. God willing, the world will witness the inauguration of great achievements in the nuclear sphere in a few days, he added. The president didn't give any ideas to exactly what these achievements might be.
The former president of Ghana, John Kufuor, has warned that the situation in the Sahel region of Africa is very serious, with drought affecting 12 million people. Speaking to the BBC, Mr Kufuor said that he feared the lessons of the recent famine in Somalia had not been learnt.
People seem always late to move till they see death. Well, the effort to save the situation should be continuous and ongoing, and the resources to put together shouldn't wait till there's an emergency.
Mr Kufuor said that the problem was compounded by conflict. He said there were daily clashes in Ghana between nomadic herdsmen who had entered the country to save their herds and local farmers fighting to save their crops from the cattle. The Palestinian group Hamas has reiterated that it will never recognise Israel, even as it seeks a reconciliation with its rival Fatah, which negotiates with the Israelis. The Prime Minister of the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, Ismail Haniyeh, said that the resistance would continue until all Palestinian land was liberated. World News from the BBC. The Burmese opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi has begun campaigning for the first time in the constituency where she's standing for election to Parliament. Crowds in the Kormu constituency lined the streets to catch a glimpse of her convoy. Rachel Harvey travelled with Aung San Suu Kyi.
From time to time, Aung San Suu Kyi would poke her head out of the sunroof of her car to collect proffered flowers and to smile and wave at people who'd waited in the sun for hours just to see her. When she finally arrived at the dusty field in a small village, there were thousands waiting to hear her speak. She told the crowd she would work hard to develop what is a desperately poor constituency, but she said everyone would have to play their part and work together to achieve the democracy they craved.
A top American diplomat is in the Maldives for talks about resolving the island nation's political deadlock. The US Assistant Secretary of State, Robert Blake, met the new president, Mohamed Wahid Hassan. He's also expected to meet the former president, Mohamed Nasheed, who said that he was removed in a coup on Tuesday. Mr Nasheed said that the international community could play an important role in resolving the crisis.
To go into a full-fledged democracy and to consolidate democracy, we need to have a free judicial system. So here is a very good opportunity, for instance, for the international community to assist in reforming the judiciary, reforming the criminal justice system, and then having fresh elections as according to the constitution.
The cabinet in Greece has approved further austerity measures demanded by its Eurozone partners in return for another multi-billion-dollar bailout. The Prime Minister had warned that failure to agree to the package would spark uncontrolled economic chaos. The cuts have to be approved by Parliament in a vote on Sunday. A BBC correspondent in Greece says the coalition government still faces a tough road ahead. BBC World News.
Hello and welcome to From Our Own Correspondent with Owen Bennett-Jones. And in this edition of the programme, playing cat and mouse with security officials in Syria and in China. Why a Russian politician felt the need to sing Britney's Hit Me Baby One More Time to a British border official. We'll also hear about China's Eastern Promise. Get rich, whether you're in Africa or Beijing. And our correspondent turned Ghostbuster in the Philippines.
How do you go about looking for a witch? It's not a question I'd ever thought to ask before. So I rang the Siquijor Tourism Department to see if they were able to help. We don't have any witches, was the first reply, which didn't seem all that promising. But after a bit more discussion, it seems that Siquijor's witches, well, the good ones anyway, have recently undergone a rebranding exercise. They're now called traditional healers. But what about the bad witches, I asked. Oh, we don't promote them, came the rather sensible reply.
More sorcery later, but first to Syria. And this time last year, most Syrians who wanted change did not dare express their opinion in public. The Arab Spring changed all that, and some people in the country are now not only calling for the downfall of the government, but are also engaged in running street battles with the Syrian army. Sensing a Western plot to force regime change, Russia and China have used their Security Council vetoes. So, stalemate in Syria and stalemate at the UN. Tim Hewell has been to Syria.
It was the potted plants on the breakfast table that I couldn't decide about. So unnecessary as decoration, and yet so perfectly positioned to catch every word of a whispered conversation. Braving the ridicule of colleagues and the obviously feigned indifference of the waiters, I ostentatiously removed them each morning before settling down to my muesli. Call it paranoia if you like, but in Syria, for those involved in or reporting on the opposition to President Assad, most such precautions are completely justified. Certainly it's not coincidence that foreign journalists, on the rare occasions that they get visas, are always placed in the same few rooms of the hotel, equipped for listening by the secret police. And it's certainly not from having read too many spy novels that opposition activists almost never arrange meetings over the phone, relying instead either on Skype or other forms of internet chat which are harder to monitor. It's from having seen too many comrades in the movement arrested, tortured, and sometimes shot. What, to your own correspondent, is a slightly stressful game of cat and mouse to get at the true story and to protect contacts, is a matter of life and death to those struggling for democracy in Syria. And so, when my colleagues and I set off for one anti-Assad demonstration in a Damascus suburb, we wandered as pre-arranged around a fashion store before clocking the presence of our contact across the bag display in women's accessories. Then, without making eye contact, we followed her at a discreet distance out onto the street. She waited, we waited, seemingly, we hoped, unconnected to one another for what felt like an unbearably long and suspicious time, until finally a car drew up, she climbed in, and wordlessly, we climbed in too. We stopped outside a shuttered workers' cafe and waited again, for longer than my nerves felt comfortable. And then, 2 minutes later, the outline of a man appeared out of the blackness, only his eyes visible through the woolen scarf that bound his face. He guided us, first in our car and then on foot, until, as the eerie sound of distant drumming and chanting grew ever louder, we suddenly emerged onto an open plot of wasteland. Framed in silhouette against the flickering flames of a bonfire, a crowd of a couple of hundred protesters were dancing, waving banners, and calling for the hanging of their president. Just visible in the shadows of the houses around, men in knitted balaclavas with rifles. Defectors, we were told, from the Syrian army who now support the rebellion. What lesson should I draw from that extraordinary, edgy, hour-long progression through the handbag department of Zara to the drum-beating heart of free Syria? That parts of the capital itself, just a short distance from the presidential palace, are now under the effective control of the revolution? Or that Assad's police state is still so powerful